Welcome to another episode of Le Coin des Experts. Today I'm very happy to have with us Joanne Kennedy. Joanne is a highly experienced naturopath and specialist in MTHFR, methylation and histamine intolerance. With her knowledge of methylation, Jo has helped hundreds of patients with chronic health issues finally heal. Joanne also specializes in digestion, gut health, SIBO, women's hormones, and chronic skin conditions. In this interview, we talk about what histamine is, pathways of histamine detoxification, main symptoms, main causes of histamine overload, SIBO and histamine, whether tests for histamine are accurate or not, Joanne's approach to reduce histamine, success stories, and of course, Joanne's take-home message. As a reminder, anything which is discussed in this interview does not intend to diagnose or treat a medical condition, so please ask your healthcare practitioner before implementing any new treatment.
Good morning, everybody, or good evening, bonjour, and welcome, a big welcome today to Joanne Kennedy from Sydney, naturopath and nutritionist and expert, of course, in histamine and all things related. Thank you, Jo, for accepting my invitation.
Oh, you're welcome, Rosario. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Today's going to be really a super interesting subject because we are going to talk about histamine and everything related to histamine. Shall we start, Jo, with just by giving a quick introduction about histamine, what it is, and maybe some of the functions?
Yeah, so histamine is what we call a biogenic amine. So all you need to know about that is that biogenic means that it is produced by plants, animals, and humans. Okay, so humans actually produce histamine. It's a normal part of our physiology, and it's extremely important that we actually do produce histamine because it vasodilates capillaries, meaning it widens capillaries so that white blood cells and platelets can go to the site of injury or infection to repair that. Okay, so it's a really important part of our immune system. It also is involved in the normal physiology of breathing. It is involved in the secretion of gastric acid. It helps stimulate the production of estrogen, which we need for menstruation. It's actually involved in the contraction of the uterus for embryo implantation. And interestingly, it is also a neurotransmitter in the brain. So it is involved in the sleep-wake cycle, i.e., going to sleep, waking up. It's also involved in, it helps stimulate the production of dopamine and serotonin and acetylcholine. So it has a lot of really, really important roles in the body. But when it builds up too much, we can have a lot of signs and symptoms and adverse reactions from too much histamine. Now, a lot of foods also contain histamine, which is why if your body is making too much histamine and you consume those high histamine foods, you will react to those foods. So that is why people react to them, is because we've got too much histamine in our body.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you. This is a great, clear explanation already, introduction about histamine. Because sometimes histamine gets the kind of a bad rap, right? And people, not knowing everything about histamine, think that histamine is the bad guy. Whereas
it is. It's actually showing us that you're having a robust immune response to something. But it doesn't mean it's pleasant. So, yes. And it doesn't mean and the good thing is it doesn't mean that you need to live with those symptoms, because this is an area of clinical practice that myself and few other practitioners are really driving forward because it's extremely common.
Right. How many people do you think, or of course you see people every day that present with symptoms of, let's call it like histamine overload? What do you think? How many people do you see that?
Rosario, it's 80% of my patient base. And people will say, yeah, but Jo, that's because you specialize in histamine. And I'd actually have to defute that and say, it's actually not. A lot of people will come to me and they don't know that their symptoms are high histamine. They don't know that their chronic reflux is high histamine. Their anxiety is high histamine. Their insomnia is high histamine. Their their skin, their eczema is high histamine. So they are seeking my services for the symptoms they have, not because they know it's histamine. So, so it is extremely common. So we have histamine receptors on most organs in our body. So it affects most systems. Therefore, the symptoms are widespread. Therefore, and they're the common symptoms that we see. So I see it all the time. Wow. And it's not just the way I see things. It is a major cause of chronic health symptoms. It is a symptom of an underlying condition, but right. It is the symptoms are very, very common.
Yes. And so that leads us to better understanding why do we have this histamine overload. So, and where is the problem? Is it at detoxification level, or where is the problem? Where are we going here?
Yeah, I think it's mainly due to people, the common things that cause high histamine in the body are the common things that people are suffering with that are causing chronic health issues that naturopaths see, such as SIBO, such as large bowel dysbiosis, parasites, candida, gluten intolerance, hormone imbalance, oxalate, mold illness, and simply digestive enzyme insufficiency. So, and look, perimenopause, that transition is just the hormone imbalance that goes on in that stage of life will cause a lot of high histamine. So the causes are the common conditions that people are seeing naturopaths for will drive up histamine.
Right. So, okay.
That's why we see it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are many people that suffer from all these great conditions that you just mentioned, unfortunately. So I see many patients with SIBO, and SIBO and histamine have, of course, a big connection there. So, but just getting back to, the enzymes that are meant to be detoxifying histamine, degrading histamine, like, the DAO enzyme, which is very famous, and HNMT enzyme. So that could be another root cause of issues with histamine. What do you think? How do you look at those?
It's not so it can be both, Rosaria. So usually what happens, I'll talk about SIBO in this regard. So with SIBO, there is significant inflammation that occurs in the small intestine, and the DAO enzyme that does break down histamine in the gut is made in the cells of the small intestine and throughout the gut in the small intestine. So the inflammation that SIBO causes cell damage. So you have a reduction in the synthesis of DAO, and also the microvilli, the tiny little hairs in the gut that the DAO enzyme actually lives in there. And the inflammation and the acidity of SIBO can cause a reduction in the synthesis and excretion from the microvilli of the DAO. So and then at the same time, that inflammation is going to be driving up your histamine, right? So it is it's a lot of histamine being reduced, and your ability to break it down is compromised. And so a big thing that happens with that is that people consume high histamine foods, and you need the DAO enzyme to break down histamine foods. So the DAO enzyme is actually overloaded with histamine coming from the gut. Therefore, this is why people will react to histamine foods.
Sure, and that makes sense.
So it's often not a DAO enzyme. Or what can also happen, and we see this in testing, is that the DAO enzyme, your synthesis and excretion of DAO is adequate. It is what the test results say is sufficient. However, it's simply overloaded with histamine. Okay. So you can have a DAO enzyme test that's normal, but that enzyme, you're producing enough. It's just you're producing it, but not enough for the amount of histamine that your body is making.
Yeah.
So that is something that we see, whereby it's that test. People will say, I don't have a problem with histamine. It's like, no, your DAO enzyme's okay, but you've got too much histamine. It's just overloaded. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the other issue with, of course, SIBO, that people are often, they have less nutrients, right? They have less absorption of nutrients available for methylation, available for all the rest. That could be another issue that can decrease histamine detoxification. Yeah.
That's the double whammy with SIBO, is that it does reduce the absorption of your methylation nutrients, folate, B12, methionine even. And without methylation, when your methylation's sluggish, or if you're not making enough methyl groups, you don't have enough methyl groups for the histamine N-methyltransferase enzyme to function properly, and that is the enzyme that breaks down histamine inside the cell. What does that kind of mean, right? What that really means is that it breaks down histamine predominantly. Clinically, what we see is it is the enzyme that's breaking down histamine in the central nervous system, because the DAO enzyme is absent in the central nervous system. So this is the take-home message about this, because it's all a bit complicated, is you need methylation to be working properly to break down histamine in the brain. Okay, so the signs and symptoms of high histamine in the brain are dizziness right through to vertigo, that's spectrum, issues regulating your body temperature, insomnia, anxiety, depression, headaches, right through to full-blown migraines, motion sickness, nausea, and vomiting. Okay, so it's the methylation that does break down histamine in the brain. However, we always need to consider why if you've got high histamine in the brain in the first place, and it's often coming from the gut, and it's often coming from estrogen. So you need to address the problems with your hormones and your gut as a priority before you take methylated nutrients, because if you take methylated nutrients with high histamine, you'll have an adverse reaction. It's very common. So I just like to slowly support the absorption of my nutrients in patients. Get the SIBO down and give them things like hydrochloric acid and pancreatic enzymes so that they can absorb the folate and the B12 and the methionine for methylation, rather than just push the methyls. It just works way better clinically.
Yeah. And do you use like a kind of low histamine diet, or what's your point of
Rosario, it just depends on what is causing the high histamine in the body. So if your high histamine is coming from SIBO, a low histamine diet might give you some relief from symptoms, but it's not going to fix it. Sure. You would need to do a SIBO diet in conjunction with a low histamine diet for best results, because doing the SIBO diet will help you get rid of SIBO, and removing the histamine foods is going to help you a lot with your symptoms. One of the key signs of high histamine with SIBO is reflux and heartburn. So, this is why you have to get the histamines down, so that then you can then take hydrochloric acid as part of what will help fix your SIBO and help you absorb your nutrients. So it's just getting back to fixing the cause and not pushing your body too much. But getting the diet can be so helpful for helping symptoms and giving your patients will get a lot of relief from doing a SIBO low histamine diet whilst at the same time treating SIBO. And it's the same with anything, but with all the other causes. It can really help. Women in perimenopause will often need to be mindful of high histamine foods during that transition, especially when they're not ovulating and producing progesterone. They have unopposed estrogen, and that increases histamine. So that can be, for some women, a period in their life whereby they will just be more sensitive to histamine. Therefore, lowering the histamine in their diet can help a lot with symptoms. And this is mainly the things like the really high histamine foods, like the fermented foods, and that's going to include wine, obviously, but beer and wine. But it can help a lot with symptoms during that transition. Yeah.
And isn't the case sometimes that people are attracted to those foods that actually are not made to be good to them? Sometimes they eat avocados or even wine or chocolate. No.
Well, they are histamine foods they are nice foods. That's just the truth of it. They are common. Well, the tomato and avocado and citrus, they aren't banana. If they are common foods. But it's just that's the only time with the only time I'm actually saying to someone simply a low histamine diet can help you with symptoms is just in that late stage of perimenopause where women are just not ovulating anymore, but they've still got a lot of unopposed estrogen, and you can't balance. You don't want to balance. You don't want to try and reinstate their cycle because they're done. They want it to kind of end. So it can be helpful at that. Just for that, I don't know, 6 months or so. It can really help with symptoms. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned testing for histamine just a few minutes ago. What do you think about testing? Do you think the tests for histamine are accurate? Can you test the DAO function? What do you think about it's a gray area here. So
yeah, no, it is. Look, I don't test it. I don't need the proof that my patient's got a histamine problem. It's very signs and symptoms for me. And if they've got the corresponding cause, so if they've got all the signs and symptoms of high histamine and they've got SIBO, or they've got an oxalate problem, or they've got a mold problem, or their hormones are out of balance, I don't need a test. Interestingly, so in Germany, they run that test all the time. And I've sort of seen a lot of German patients. It's not often that DAO's low, but I have seen it low.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when I'm questioning significant cell damage with things like mold. So when it's low, it's not common. It's not a gene mutation. It's the environment, epigenetics. What in the environment has triggered that gene? And it would be something like maybe Lyme disease or something undiagnosed celiac disease or celiac disease that was diagnosed late, irritable bowel disease, mold, heavy metal toxicity, Lyme disease, something like that.
Yeah,
bigger something like that. It wouldn't just be from SIBO or large bowel dysbiosis that it would be low like that. And then whole blood histamine. And then the thing with whole blood histamine is histamine in the blood is broken down by methylation. So the whole blood histamine test, if it's your whole blood histamine is in range, it might just say that the methylation's breaking it down adequately, but it doesn't give us any idea of what's going on with histamine symptoms, particularly from estrogen or in your gut or anything like that. So that test is actually not that useful.
Yeah.
The testing for the causes is where you need to put your money and time, is testing for the causes. Yeah.
Right. So that's very interesting. Thank you for specifying that for us, because here in France as well, many doctors and functional doctors, they run tests like DAO, and then people are getting confused. They don't know whether they have enough or not.
Yeah, I think it's confusing because it can sometimes people will think no, they don't have a problem with histamine or DAO, but the signs, right? The signs and symptoms, if the signs and symptoms, if they're on my website, if anyone wants to look, but they are so reliable.
Yeah. Really,
very, very reliable. So if you've got some signs and symptoms, or just simply removing high histamine foods from your diet for a week and see if some of your symptoms improve, then okay, then I probably do have an issue with histamine. And then you need to investigate what would be the root cause.
Right. Yeah. And I know that in your clinic, you work also with people that have mold issues. Of course, oxalate is a big issue as well. Can you tell us a bit more when are you suspecting maybe an oxalate, for instance, issue?
So oxalates, for those that don't know, are basically our body makes oxalates. They're also in plant foods, and they are in some mold species, and they're basically really sharp crystals. And they deposit in the gut, in joints. They can get into the thyroid, even into the brain, in muscle tissue, and they cause chronic inflammation, right? That will cause a lot of histamine to be released due to the inflammation. Okay, so a classic symptom of high oxalate is pain. Okay, so it's gut pain, joint pain, muscle pain. Our body's endogenous production of oxalate will be broken down by the kidneys and the urine. So it can be bladder pain, vaginal pain, frequent urination, cloudy urine, smelly urine is a sign of oxalate. It does, and then you've got all the high histamine symptoms that it can cause. So oxalates is something that will drive up histamine a lot. It's like the hidden culprit. But you know, if you can do an organic acids test to see if you've got high oxalate, and then the mold illness is common. It's very hard. It's somewhat hard to diagnose just with testing, but it is if you've had exposure to mold, if you know that, if you have, if you're living in a house with visible mold, or if there's leaking taps or dampness, these are it is a red flag, and mold is toxic to humans. So it drives up inflammation in the body and does cause a lot of histamine symptoms. And some mold species actually contain oxalate as well. A good test for that is just the fasting homocysteine test. If your homocysteine is low, that is a red flag for mold and or oxalate problems. So that's a test you can run from your doctor. But it is really considering exposure, and your exposure doesn't have to be a lot for it to be causing problems.
Right, yeah, because it depends on our immune system, right? So if someone has maybe a bit lower immune system, you know, and can be more sensitive to even a brief exposure, right?
Oh, absolutely. Or some people genetically can't break down histamine, mold. So you might be one of those people and you don't have a lot of exposure, but it's really going to impact you. Or you simply have just in a lot of mold and people are unaware. People are completely and utterly unaware. So it's a big problem. And, you know, the mold and oxalate people are usually the people that have seen many practitioners, done lots of different testing, protocols for other things that are common that us naturopaths do with no great lasting result.
Yeah.
That is actually a really big red flag where people just are doing the normal things that naturopaths do, fixing gut, balancing hormones, and it just doesn't ever really work for them. I think that's a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, the multi-system presentation.
And multi-system presentation.
Yeah, chronic. Great. And so getting back just to histamine, do you have any tips of what do you do for? So you mentioned already the diet, of course. Any other quick tips that you may like to share with us today in regards to helping histamine getting down a little bit?
Yeah. So for those that just really want to try and help with symptoms before they can and see someone who can really help them clinically, low histamine diet, you can try and supplement with DAO and see if that helps with. You can purchase DAO enzyme online. You can purchase some of the zeolite clays and activated charcoal can bind up histamine in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just reducing it in your diet and trying to bind it and give yourself the DAO enzyme, that can, in some instances, give some relief.
Yeah.
But it is a symptom of an underlying health condition. So that's why it really needs to be investigated. But I'll just quickly run through what I've seen as the main causes. So it's going to be digestive enzyme insufficiency, okay, pancreatic enzymes and hydrochloric acid and bile acids, okay, gluten intolerance or just eating too much gluten, okay. It's going to be SIBO. It's going to be large bowel dysbiosis and like candida parasites. It's going to be estrogen, and it will be oxalates, mold, and there are many medications that can actually increase histamine in the body as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Because
I encourage people to do a Google search, just a search for that. There's a lot of lists online, and you can double check and you can have a look at the. I don't think the drug companies will list it as an adverse reaction, high histamine, but you can have a search. But there are a lot of medications.
There's this, the Swiss group about histamine intolerance. and they have the whole list there. So it's
okay. That's a really good resource for people to have a look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, celiac disease, irritable bowel disease, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, Helicobacter pylori will also increase histamine. So really, and then things like Lyme disease, or severe heavy metal toxicity will also probably. Yeah, so they're kind of the main causes that I see clinically.
Yeah. So, and do you like using, popular things that sometimes people use, like vitamin C or perilla or, quercetin, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the thing with vitamin C and quercetin is that they're mast cell stabilizers. Now, the interesting thing is mast cells are not the only cells that will produce histamine. So a lot of other cells, like the smooth muscle cells in the gut, will create histamine under duress from inflammation. So they're not mast cells as such. So sometimes vitamin C and quercetin don't necessarily work. It just depends on the cause. But by all means, you can try. There are some supplements that some people can get some relief from. Yeah. But it will never be consistent, and it will never go away until the root causes are treated.
Yeah,
that's just how it is. So it's your body giving you a warning sign that something's wrong. And the thing why I love working with histamine so much is that when the histamine symptoms really, to me, pinpoint the symptoms will lead to the diagnosis of the condition that person has. Like when I'm doing a workup for SIBO, if someone's got, constipation, bloating, flatulence, and they've got nausea and headaches and reflux and eczema, it's like, well, they've got lots of SIBO symptoms and histamine symptoms. I'm going to test them for SIBO.
Sure.
Right. So they don't have bloating and they don't have like upper quadrant gut issues, but they've got really bad PMS. They've got irregular menstrual cycles. They get hormonal migraines, hormonal, eczema or acne flare-ups can be histamine as well. Then it's like, wow, you're really estrogen dominant here.
Yeah.
So it helps a lot with really working out what's going on. The symptoms as histamine help us as clinicians identify the real underlying condition in that person. Yeah, so it's really helpful. Yeah.
And thank you. This is so useful. Thank you so much, Jo. And some things that people should not take, maybe, or we were mentioning maybe collagen the other day, or some supplements that actually are not great if someone has an overload of histamine.
Okay, so if you've got an overload of histamine, first of all, do not take methylated supplements like methylfolate, methyl B12 or SAMe. It's very likely to give you an adverse reaction. If you are already taking it and it hasn't, that's fine. Okay, so or even simply if you do react to B vitamins, if you get a headache or an adverse reaction from B vitamins, it's potentially because you're too high in histamine. You really shouldn't be taking vitamin C if you've got high oxalate because it increases oxalate. What was the question? What other
things? Collagen.
Oh, okay. So look, again, like bone broth is super high histamine. Collagen can be a bit high histamine.
Depends.
So you need to get your histamines down first before you go in with collagen for healing.
And what do you think about fasting? Do you think that fasting may increase inflammation and histamine? Or
no, it's just I think fasting is great. It just depends. Fasting for I think the problem with, I have to say it this way first. If you're a menstruating woman and you've got a lot going on in your life and you've got a big job and family and whatever, fasting is probably not good for you. It can really throw out your hormones.
Yeah.
So women's hormones can be thrown out and you can get irregular menstrual cycles from fasting. And that is because when you're in the fasting state, to get glucose to run your brain, it increases adrenaline and cortisol. Okay. And adrenaline and cortisol are hormone disruptors. and it can disrupt your thyroid hormone and your sex hormone, and then you can end up like really bad hormone imbalance and terrible PMS symptoms. So I'm very careful with fasting in menstruating women, okay, unless they've put themselves on that diet and they're doing well and losing weight and they haven't got an irregular menstrual cycle. Some women are just more robust than others. You know, it just depends. I did it myself and it wasn't good for me. So that's something. But, you know, men, postmenopausal women, it's great because it's great for SIBO to not eat and to allow the migrating motor complex to kick in.
Yeah.
So it can be helpful depending on your condition. But if it's a hormone condition, if you're menstruating, you've got irregular periods, it's not good. Or, you know, I think a red flag for women is when they do fast, especially if they're having coffee on an empty stomach, because that is allowed, and you start to get anxious and you can feel yourself wired.
Okay, so that's a big number.
Well, that is a big red flag for it. It's gonna cause hormone disruption. Yeah.
Thank you. Any success stories, anything you like to share in terms of some great success stories that you see, of course, in your clinic?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a few areas that I just think the real success for me is just unraveling those really hard oxalate cases, because these people have been sick for 20 years. No one knows what's going on. It causes every symptom you can imagine, including fatigue, depression, anxiety, migraines, pain, and no one knows. And mold's the same. So it's just being able to diagnose that and then help people through that health hurdle. And they've been sick for 20 years and it's really rewarding. So that's great. I love working with SIBO. To me, it's such a great thing. We can test, we can treat, we can retest, make sure it's gone. You know, it is really rewarding. SIBO makes people very sick as well. You know, don't underestimate that.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, sometimes I'm like, oh, this is more than SIBO, and it's just not, because it's just such chronic malabsorption of nutrients, including iron, and massive histamine issues, massive brain fog. So a lot of men and women suffer really badly from SIBO because of all the inflammation that it can cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially here on this side of the world, unfortunately, SIBO is still not very well known. So there's a lot of work to do. And millions of people.
Oh, it's the SIBO is, I think people need to understand, it's the most common cause of what's diagnosed as IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, from the medical community. It is the most common cause of that. I'd say, 80% of the people who come to my clinic weekly will have SIBO. It's extremely common. And it's not a disease, you know, it's nothing to be scared of. And getting a sort of diagnosis of that and a proper treatment can just help so much with your symptoms and your health. And if you work with a practitioner that will guide you on why you got SIBO in the first place and put measures in place to prevent it coming back, it's just something that you can get over and then just thrive. So I really like treating SIBO. It is rewarding, and it's very there's a beginning, middle, end, and it's a nice thing to do. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know, of course, firsthand that you recently launched a very, very interesting course for practitioners. Would you like sharing a bit more about your course, Jo?
Thanks. Yeah, so I've developed an online group coaching course, and it is for practitioners. The course goes over 8 weeks. There's about 7 hours of recorded webinar content for people to keep. And then we do a 90-minute group coaching call every week to go over the important things for that lesson and any questions. And we go over case studies, and people other practitioners share their own knowledge or cases that they might have. So it's a really good learning platform for other practitioners. So I'm sort of halfway through my current one. I'm about to launch the next one. I think the sales page will ready on the 22nd of April, and it will start at the 3rd of June. Will be next round.
Histamine, methylation.
That's right. We cover histamine intolerance, what it is, all the major causes of histamine, and what they are, how to test them, how to treat them. And when we go, there's a whole lesson on MTHFR and what that actually really means, because there's a lot of hype around MTHFR. And there's 2 lessons on methylation, so the methylation pathway, and then the transsulfuration pathway, which is a pathway implicated in mold and oxalate. So it's histamine and methylation because they're very intricately linked.
And so mold, right? That's one.
Yeah, and mold. Yeah, and so it's all linked together. So if there is there is information on my website about the course. It's actually, so if you want to join the wait list, you can do that just via my course.
We'll publish your link.
Yeah, if you join the wait list, then you'll be emailed all the information about what the course is. And I've also got some other news, which is I'm about to launch a course for patients.
Oh, good.
My patients, everyone was getting annoyed that it wasn't for patients. So this is an 8-week course. It's an educational course. I think there's a big problem with patients not being educated on what is going on with their health. And I can't just do it in my consult because it's just too much. So this is recorded webinars around it's all the causes of high histamine and what testing you can do. There's some treatment options that you can think about doing in conjunction on your own or in conjunction with another practitioner. And it also has a whole lesson on MTHFR, what that actually is, because people are very interested in it. And there's a lot of misinformation about that. And then there's a whole lesson on methylation. Will be for that'll be for patients, and it's going to be launching soon. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well done, Jo. That's awesome. That's really a course that is different to any other course, existing courses on the market. So it's was missing. So thank you.
I'm just kind of doing it, I think, for my patient base first, and then just for people that don't have, or that I can't see, but I think people are very interested, and rightly so. For instance, I've got to say to someone, you've got SIBO and high histamine, and they're like, well, what does that really mean? And I can talk to them for 10 minutes, but this is like, I don't know how long it is. It's quite lengthy. I think it's probably going to be about 5 hours of content altogether.
Yeah.
So it's just helpful for people to understand what's going on. It empowers people.
Yeah. And rightly so, because unfortunately, as you said, when someone is unwell, they look for answers everywhere. And unfortunately, sometimes they fall on the wrong answers, the wrong information, not scientific information. And so it's great that, you put this together also for patients. Okay, Jo, how shall we conclude this wonderful session today? Do you have a take-home message about histamine, about something? What would you like to share with our
take-home message, guys, is just, I know histamine symptoms are uncomfortable and unpleasant, but they are guiding you to what your health issue is, what your underlying health issue is. Okay, yeah. So they are, don't look at them as the enemy, look at them as a guide to getting you to the right treatment and the right, you need to uncover the cause. And if the treatment you're doing is not working, it's not right. It's not fixing it. That's the thing. If you are on the right path with the treatment for your histamine, you should get relief quickly with your symptoms whilst you're correcting the imbalance in your body. Yeah. But that's it. Yeah, I think. Also, a lot of overdiagnosis of MCAS. MCAS is a serious condition. I'm not saying it isn't, but sometimes people don't have MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. They simply have inflammation and histamine coming from oxalates or from SIBO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The main cause of mast cell activation syndrome is mold, really. So if you have been diagnosed with MCAS, then you would really want to look at mold as being the cause of that, if that hasn't been done for you.
Yeah.
Or if you're just not sure, if you're like, oh God, I've got all the signs and symptoms of SIBO. Like maybe I've just got SIBO. This is common where I see that's happening, where they've been diagnosed with MCAS, but it's just a histamine overload, not the mast cells degranulating in a berserk kind of fashion.
Yeah.
So I just want to add one more thing, just for anyone interested in the patient course. Following me on Instagram is where you'll see that promoted. So it's Joanne Kennedy naturopath is just my Instagram handle, and they'll be able to find that there because it's not on the website yet.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll mention all these details on the YouTube comments, of course. Yeah. Well, Jo, this was amazing today. Thank you so much for being with us and for taking the time to share all your great knowledge. Maybe we'll have you here another time on another topic. So.
We can talk about hormones and histamine.
Hormones, yes, it's a big one. Definitely.
Really fun.
Thanks again, Jo. And yeah, I'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks, Rosaria. Bye.